The air inside the G-Wagon was so frigid it felt like a different country. Outside, the Lakota City sun beat down on the endless river of vehicles, transforming the atmosphere into a shimmering soup of heat and exhaust. Kaelo Adebayo loosened the knot of his silk tie. "Is there no movement at all, Joseph?" His driver just shook his head, eyes fixed on the gridlocked traffic. "Oga, even the Okadas are trapped. A complete standstill." Kaelo glanced at the gold watch on his wrist. 10 minutes late. The press were waiting. The Minister of Urban Development was present. The entire city anticipated his arrival, the people's developer, to officially launch the Sunrise Initiative. It was his signature project, his legacy. He tapped his fingers on the polished leather armrest, a restless, irritated rhythm. This day was meant to be perfect, a flawless execution. Instead, he was confined here, boiling in a cold car, listening to the cacophony of 1,000 angry horns. A sharp rap on the window made him jump. He turned. A girl stood there no older than 16. Her face was smudged with dirt, her t-shirt a faded, shapeless green. In one hand, she held 2 bottles of lukewarm water. With the other, she pointed at the bottles, then to her mouth, the universal gesture for thirst. A street vendor. Kaelo gave a sharp, dismissive wave. "No." He looked away, focusing on the back of his chauffeur's head, hoping she would simply move on. He could feel her still standing there, her presence a tiny, annoying disruption to his very important schedule. Another minute passed. He could not stand it. He shifted back to shoo her away again, ready to snap, ready to tell her to just go. But this time he truly saw her. Not just the grime, not just the cheap shirt. He saw her face, and his world stopped. It was the eyes, large, dark, intelligent irises, set in a face that was thin and worn, but the shape of it, the high cheekbones, the stubborn set of her jaw. It was impossible, yet it was true. They were Said's eyes. The memory hit him like a physical force, a ghost from 20 years ago. Said in her university art class, laughing, a smudge of charcoal on her cheek. Said on the beach at night, telling him his poems were better than his father's money. Said crying, the last time he ever saw her, after his father had engineered their breakup with a cruel, calculated lie. Kaelo's breath hitched. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, wild drum. The cold air of the car seemed to rush out of his lungs. It couldn't be. A coincidence. A trick of the light. The young woman, seeing his strange expression, knocked again, a little more insistently. "Water," she mouthed. He couldn't speak. He just stared, his mind reeling, trying to piece together a puzzle that had been buried for 2 decades. The timeline, it was possible. Oh God, it was entirely plausible. His hands trembled as he fumbled for his wallet. He pulled out a wad of naira, a stupidly large amount. He pressed the button to lower the tinted window, the sudden rush of hot, humid air a shock to his system. "Here," he croaked, his voice a dry rasp. He thrust the money at her. "Take it." The teenager stared at the thick bundle of notes, her eyes wide with suspicion. She looked from the cash to his face, then back again. For a second, she appeared like she might accept it. Then her expression hardened. She shook her head, a small, sharp movement. She took a step back from the luxury vehicle, her face a mask of cynical pride. She had seen men like him before. Rich men in big cars who thought their money could fix anything. The traffic ahead of them suddenly lurched forward. Joseph hit the accelerator and the G-Wagon surged onward. "Wait," Kaelo yelled, twisting in his seat. But it was too late. He looked back through the rear window, watching as she was swallowed by the chaos of the street. Just a flash of a faded green top before she disappeared completely. The money was still in his hand. He stared down at it, his fingers numb. Joseph cleared his throat. "We are moving now, Olga. We can still make the press conference, the media engagement, the minister, the Sunrise Initiative." All of it felt hollow, meaningless. A different world. His carefully constructed reality had just been shattered by a face in the glass. "Turn around," Kaelo said, his voice quiet but firm. "Sir?" The driver sounded confused. "But the conference—" "I said turn around." The command echoed in the small space, sharp and absolute. His knuckles were white as he gripped the armrest. The practiced smile, the confident posture, it had all evaporated. He was just a man staring into an abyss that had suddenly opened up in the middle of his perfect life. Joseph, shocked into silence, expertly swung the massive vehicle into an illegal U-turn, earning a fresh symphony of enraged horns. "Where are we going, Olga?" his employee asked, his voice now laced with concern. Kaelo didn't look at him. He was staring out the window, his eyes scanning the crowd, searching for a ghost. "Go back," he uttered, his voice barely a whisper. "Find her." The private investigator's name was Bode. He was a discreet man with tired eyes who knew how to make problems vanish. But Kaelo hadn't hired him to make this one disappear. He had hired him to make it real. Bode slid a brown envelope across Kaelo's vast, polished mahogany desk. "We found her, sir." Kaelo's hand shook slightly as he reached for it. Inside were grainy photographs, the girl with the worn green shirt hawking water in traffic, the same teenager haggling for fish at a crowded market stall, the young woman helping an older lady with a bucket of water, and then the last picture, the girl standing in the doorway of a shack, a dilapidated structure of corrugated iron and scavenged wood, perched precariously over dark, murky water. Bode cleared his throat. "Her name is Femi. She is 16 years old. She lives with her mother." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Her mother's name is Sade." The name landed like a stone in the silent, air-conditioned office. It was true. Kaelo stared at the final photograph. He recognized that place. He knew it from satellite images, from architectural surveys, from the glossy brochures for his biggest project yet. "Where is this?" Kaelo asked, though he already knew the answer. "Makoko Waterside, sir," Bode confirmed. Zone 4, Zone 4. The very heart of the area slated for demolition. The future site of the Sunrise Initiative's luxury condominiums. A wave of nausea washed over the developer. He was going to bulldoze his own daughter's home. He told Joseph to stay behind. He drove himself, swapping the G-Wagon for an unremarkable black sedan. He parked on the edge of the solid land and walked. The air changed immediately. The sterile, refrigerated world of his office was replaced by the thick organic smells of wood smoke, salt water, and humanity. He followed the investigator's crude map, his expensive leather shoes sinking into the soft, muddy ground. He crossed a rickety wooden bridge, his navy blue suit a beacon of wealth in a sea of poverty. People stopped and stared. Children pointed. He ignored them all, his eyes fixed on the maze of shacks ahead. He found the number Bode had written down, a faded 27 painted on a blue door. He stood there for a long moment, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He raised his hand to knock, then let it fall. What was he even doing here? What could he possibly say? The door creaked open before he could decide. A woman stood there, her frame so thin it seemed a strong breeze could carry her away. She was wrapped in a faded blue and white wrapper. Her face was gaunt, her skin stretched tight over her cheekbones. But her eyes, they were exactly as he remembered them, fierce, intelligent, and now filled with a cold, hard recognition. It was Sade. "So," she said, her voice a dry rasp, "the great man visits the slum." She looked down at his immaculate shoes, then back at his face. "Your footwear will get dirty here. You should leave." "Sade," he breathed her name. It felt foreign on his tongue. "Don't," she snapped, her voice surprisingly strong. "Don't you dare say my name." From inside the shack, a voice called out, "Mama? Who is it?" Femi appeared behind her mother, wiping her hands on her jeans. She froze when she saw Kaelo, her eyes narrowing. She immediately put a protective arm around her mother's waist, her body a shield. "What do you want?" Femi's voice was sharp, accusatory. Kaelo couldn't find the words. He looked from the teenager's face to Sade's, the impossible truth standing right in front of him. A daughter. He had a daughter. I wanted to see you," he finally managed. The words sounding pathetic and hollow even to his own ears. Sade let out a short, bitter laugh. "You wanted to see us? It has been 16 years, Kaelo. You are a little late." She began to cough, a deep rattling sound that shook her entire body. Femi held her tight, glaring at Kaelo as if the cough was his fault, as if his very presence was making her mother sick. "She's ill," Kaelo stated, the obvious hanging in the air. "Let me help. I can get her to a hospital." "The best doctors?" "We don't want your help," Femi spat. "My money is not poison," Sade corrected her daughter, her eyes still locked on the developer. "It is the price he puts on his guilt. We are not for sale." The ailing woman had to lean against the doorframe, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Femi guided her back inside to a simple wooden stool. Kaelo took a hesitant step into the one-room shack. It was clean but bare, a thin mattress in one corner, a small table with 2 stools. A single kerosene lamp. His eyes were drawn to the wall. Tacked to the rough plywood was a piece of paper. It was a drawing, a charcoal sketch of Femi. It was extraordinary. The artist had captured everything. Her guarded expression, the defiant spark in her eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw. It was more real than any photograph. He looked at the bottom corner. A simple signature, Sadie. He remembered that signature. He remembered her hands, always smudged with charcoal. The talent he had once admired, the talent his father had dismissed as a poor girl's hobby, was still there. It had been poured into this one stunning portrait, a portrait of their child. "You still draw?" he said softly. Sade looked at the sketch, then back at him, her expression unreadable. There was only one thing left worth drawing. The statement hung in the small room, an indictment more powerful than any shout. He had built an empire of glass and steel, but she had created this life, a legacy that was real and breathing. He reached for his wallet again, a desperate, clumsy gesture. "Please, let me help. For her." He nodded towards Femi. "Get out," Sade whispered, her voice trembling with a quiet, powerful rage. She touched her throat, a gesture of profound finality. "Get out of my home." Femi stood up, her small frame radiating menace. She pointed a finger at the door. "You heard her. Leave." Kaelo looked at them one last time. The dying artist and the fierce girl who was his own flesh and blood. He backed out of the shack, stumbling over the uneven threshold. He walked away, the image of the charcoal sketch burned into his mind. He didn't just have a daughter. He had a child who lived in a home he was about to destroy, with a mother who despised him more than anyone on earth. And as he crossed the rickety bridge back to his world, he knew this wasn't a problem money could solve. This was a reckoning. The silence in their mansion was a presence. It lived in the vast, echoing spaces between the minimalist furniture and the museum-quality art. It was a stillness Kaelo usually found comforting. Tonight it felt like a tomb. Imani sat across from him, a glass of water on the coaster beside her. She wore a severe white dress, her posture ramrod straight. She hadn't said a word since he had started speaking 10 minutes ago. She just listened, her face a beautiful, unreadable mask. He finished his story, the words hanging in the sterile air. He told her everything. The girl in the traffic, the investigator, the shack in Makoko, the charcoal sketch, Sadie. He waited for the explosion, the shouting, the accusations. Instead, she was perfectly still. Her dark eyes were fixed on him, not with anger, but with an unnerving, analytical calm. She picked up her glass, her movements precise and contained. "Sade," Imani said, testing the name. It sounded like a foreign object in her mouth. "The artist you told me about. From university." Kaelo just nodded, his throat tight. "And the timeline confirms it," she continued, her voice level. "The girl is 16. You were 29 when we met." It wasn't a question. It was a calculation, a neat summation of facts. He watched her, bewildered by her composure. She was supposed to be furious. This was the ultimate betrayal. But Imani was not processing a betrayal. She was analyzing a threat. She stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the glittering lights of Lakota City. For a long moment, she stared out at the view, at the empire she had helped him build. When she finally spoke, her back was still to him. "Do you remember what Dr. Adeyemi told us last year?" The question was so out of place it took Kaelo a moment to comprehend. Dr. Adeyemi, the fertility specialist. The last in a long, expensive line of specialists. "Imani, what does that have to do with anything?" "He told us it was final," she said, her voice a little tighter now. No more treatments, no possibility. He used the word barren. She turned around, and for the first time, Kaelo saw a crack in her perfect armor, a flicker of something raw and wounded in her eyes. "I accepted that," she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I accepted that the Adebayo legacy would be buildings, foundations, a name on a hospital wing, not a child." She walked back towards him, her composure returning with every step. The mask was back in place. "And now you tell me that the legacy already exists, that it has existed for 16 years, and that it lives in a slum." "Imani, I didn't know." "Knowing is irrelevant," she cut him off, her voice sharp as glass. "What matters is what exists now. A sick, dying mistress and a beggar daughter, living in the demolition zone of your flagship project. Do you have any idea what the tabloids will do with that? what our rivals will do. It won't just damage us, Kaelo. It will obliterate us. She began to pace, her movements sharp and energetic. Her mind was working, formulating a strategy. This was her element. Damage control. The mother is proud, Amani stated. She refused your money. Good. That is an emotion. We can work around emotion. She stopped pacing and looked directly at him, her eyes cold and clear. This is not about feelings. This is about containment. She started tapping her manicured nails on the back of a leather armchair, a sharp staccato rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. We will draft an agreement. An NDA so legally airtight it could survive a nuclear blast. We will offer a sum of money, not an insulting handful of notes from your wallet. A life-altering amount, enough for the best medical care in Switzerland, enough for the girl to be educated anywhere in the world. Kaelo stared at her, horrified. You want to buy them? I want to solve a problem, she corrected him. We will transfer the funds to an offshore account. They will be given new passports, a new life. They will disappear. The girl and her mother become a non-event. A rumor that can be easily denied. She made it sound so simple, so clean, an erasure. The same way his father had erased Saad from his life all those years ago. He felt the same cold dread he had felt as a young man, the same feeling of being trapped by a will stronger than his own. She won't agree, Kaelo said weakly. Said has too much pride. Imani smiled, a thin, humorless stretching of her lips. The mother's pride is a luxury. The daughter, you said, is protective. She sees her mother dying. She will not have the same pride. The daughter is the key. She walked over to him, placing a cool hand on his shoulder. It was not a gesture of comfort. It was a gesture of command. You will go back there, Amani said, her voice low and insistent. You will make the offer. You will not present it as a payoff. You will present it as a compassionate solution from a man who wants to do the right thing. You will sell it, Kaelo. Use that charm you use on investors and politicians. He looked into her eyes and saw no empathy. No shred of human feeling for the dying woman or the lost girl. He saw only the cold, hard logic of a queen protecting her kingdom, a kingdom she had built, a kingdom she would not allow a ghost to haunt. This thing must be surgically removed, she said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. The phrase chilled him to the bone. She wasn't talking about a person. She was talking about a tumor, a malignant growth on the perfect body of their life. He knew in that moment that he was trapped. Trapped between the ghost of a past he was too weak to claim and a present he was too weak to defy. And he knew with a certainty that made his stomach clench that he was going to do exactly what she said. The second visit was worse than the first. Kaelo brought a lawyer this time, a man named Tunda with a crocodile skin briefcase and a smile that never reached his eyes. They stood in the small clearing outside the shack, an island of expensive wool suits in a world of mud and plywood. He delivered the offer exactly as Amani had coached him. He spoke of compassion, of righting old wrongs, of a future for Femi and world-class care for Said. He avoided the words contract and payment, using phrases like secure arrangement and support fund. Said listened from her stool just inside the doorway, her body wrapped in the same faded wrapper. Femi stood beside her, a silent, stony-faced guard. When Kaelo finished, the silence was heavy. Said looked at him, her eyes burning with a feverish intensity. She did not look at the lawyer. She did not look at the briefcase. She only looked at Kaelo. So this is the man you've become, she said, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. The boy I knew wrote poetry. This man sends a lawyer. She coughed, a deep, painful spasm that bent her double. Femi rushed to her side, rubbing her back. Hi, Mama. This is my final insult, Said continued, her voice gaining a terrifying strength. First your father pays me to disappear. Now you want to pay me to die quietly somewhere else. The Adebayo way. She pointed a trembling finger at the door. Take your arrangement. Take your support fund. And get out of my life. Forever. The dismissal was absolute. Kaelo felt a strange mix of shame and relief. He had failed. He could go back to Amani and tell her it was impossible. But as he and the lawyer turned to leave, he saw Femi's face. She was watching them go, and in her eyes, he didn't see the same rigid pride as her mother. He saw desperation. He saw the face of a child watching her only parent fade away. That night, Femi lay on her thin mattress, listening to the sound of her mother's ragged breathing. Each cough was a countdown. The doctor at the local clinic had been kind but clear. Without specialist care, it was a matter of months, maybe weeks. Pride was a luxury her mother could afford, but she could not. An idea, cold and terrifying, began to form in her mind. The next day, Femi found a public phone booth that still worked. She used the last of her money to buy a call card. Her fingers trembled as she dialed the number on the business card the lawyer, Tunda, had tried to leave behind. A card she had snatched from the dirt after they had gone. "I want to talk about the arrangement," she said when the secretary put her through. Her voice was small but steady. Tunda sounded surprised but quickly masked it with smooth professionalism. He agreed to meet her, not in Makoko, not at his office, a neutral location, a cheap roadside cafeteria far from the city center. Femi sat in a sticky plastic chair, a bottle of warm soda in front of her. Tundi arrived, briefcase in hand. He looked deeply out of place. "My mother doesn't know I'm here," Femi began. "She will never agree, but I will." Tunde's professional smile widened. He had found the weak link. The key, just as the boss's wife had predicted. He opened his briefcase. "A wise decision, young lady. Your mother is unwell. She is not thinking clearly." He laid out the terms. The staggering sum of money, the new identities, the one-way tickets to Geneva, the non-disclosure agreement. He explained it all in a calm, clinical tone, as if he were discussing a simple business merger. Femi listened, nodding at all the right moments. She asked a few simple questions about the hospital, about the school she would attend. She played the part of the scared but pragmatic daughter perfectly. But as he spoke, her left hand was hidden beneath the table, clutching a small, cheap mobile phone. The red light of the record function was blinking steadily. "And this agreement?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "It means we can never come back? And we can never, ever speak about him?" "That is correct," Tunda said smoothly. "It is for everyone's protection. A clean break. Mr. Adebayo can move forward with his life, and you and your mother can begin a new one, free of all this difficulty." He slid a document across the table. "You are a minor, so your mother would have to sign. But your verbal agreement today is a sign of good faith. It shows us you are serious." "I'm serious," Femi said, her eyes fixed on the document. She had it. Everything she needed. The clinical, heartless confirmation of the cover-up, straight from the mouth of his own lawyer. She left the cafeteria with Tunda's assurances ringing in her ears. He thought he had won. He thought he had bought her. That evening, Femi walked to the small internet cafe on the edge of the slum. It was noisy and crowded. She paid for 30 minutes of time. Her hands were sweating as she logged into a burner email account. She knew the name of the blogger. Everyone did. Lakota Leaks, a notorious online journalist who had taken down politicians and businessmen with anonymously sourced information. He was ruthless, untraceable, and had a massive following among the city's youth. She attached the audio file. The recording was clear. Tunda's smooth voice detailing the plan for their disappearance. Her own small voice asking for clarification. In the body of the email, she typed a short, simple message. "He calls himself the People's Developer. He is building the Sunrise Initiative on top of our homes. This is what he does to the people who get in his way. This is his daughter. This is his dying mistress. Let the people hear the truth." She stared at the screen, her finger hovering over the send button. This was it. There was no going back. This was not about money. This was a war. For her mother. For her home. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood. Then she clicked send. The next morning, a new notice was nailed to a post in the center of the community. The demolition date for Zone 4 had been moved up. It was now just 2 days away, the day of the groundbreaking ceremony. Femi's stomach plummeted. Her email had done nothing. The blogger hadn't responded. Her plan, her one desperate gamble, had failed. They were out of time. The morning of the groundbreaking ceremony, the internet exploded. It started as a trickle, then became a flood. The headline from Lakota Leaks was brutal. "The People's Developer's Secret, Buying and Burying His Beggar Daughter." Below it was the audio file. Tunda's voice smooth and damning. Femi's voice small and heartbreaking. The story went viral. It was on every phone, every blog, every social media feed. Adebayo scandal was the #1 trend in the country. In the penthouse suite overlooking the ceremony site, Kaelo's world was imploding. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from his board, from the minister's office, from panicked sponsors. He didn't answer. He just stared at his tablet, listening to the recording on a loop. listening to the cold, clinical dismantling of a human life, his daughter's life. Imani was a whirlwind of controlled fury. She was on her own phone, barking orders at her PR team. Deny everything. It's a fabrication, a deepfake, a political hit job. We countersue for defamation. We release a statement about protecting my husband from malicious attacks. Now! She hung up and turned to Kaelo, her face a mask of steel. Did you hear me, Kaelo? We deny. You will go out there, you will get on that stage, and you will give the performance of your life. You will express outrage. You will promise to find the criminals who manufactured this lie. You will be strong. He looked at his wife. He saw the brilliant strategist. He saw the wounded queen protecting her castle. But for the first time, he also saw the same cold, absolute ruthlessness as his father. The same willingness to erase a human being for the sake of an empire. He thought of the charcoal sketch, the one beautiful thing in that bleak shack, the testament to a talent he had abandoned and a life he had never known. It's not a lie, Imani, he said, his voice quiet. Truth is irrelevant, she shot back, her voice cracking for the first time. Perception is everything. Are you going to let a 16-year-old street girl destroy everything we have built? Down below, the crowd was a mix of dignitaries in starched white agbadas and a growing angry mob of protesters held back by a thin line of police. Femi was in that crowd. She had come not knowing if her leak had worked, only knowing she had to be there. She had to witness it. When she saw the protesters holding signs with her father's face crossed out, she knew it had worked. On the lavishly decorated stage, the minister was sweating, whispering frantically to an aide. Sponsors were pulling out. The carefully orchestrated ceremony was descending into chaos. Imani grabbed Kaelo's arm, her fingers digging into his bicep. It is time. Go up there. Save us. Kaelo walked towards the podium, his legs feeling like lead. He could see his wife watching him, her eyes willing him to be the man she had forged. He could see the minister's panicked face. He could see the flashing cameras of the press, hungry for blood. And then he saw her, at the edge of the crowd just beyond the police line. Femi. She was being jostled by the angry protesters, but her eyes were fixed on him. In that moment, he didn't see a scandal. He didn't see a threat. He saw his daughter. He saw Said's eyes burning with a righteous fire. He saw the charcoal sketch come to life. He reached the podium. He looked down at the prepared speech, full of empty promises about a bright new dawn. He pushed it aside. The teleprompter screen was blank anyway. He leaned into the microphone. The crowd hushed. My name is Kaelo Adebayo, he began, his voice amplified across the tense square. And for most of my life, I have been a coward. A collective gasp went through the audience. Imani took a step forward, her face a picture of disbelief and horror. The recording you have all heard is true. He let the words sink in. There is a young woman in this city named Femi, and that girl is my daughter. He spoke for 10 minutes. It was not a speech. It was a confession, raw, unscripted, and brutal. He spoke of Said, of his weakness, of his father's cruelty, and of how he had almost repeated the exact same sin. He tore down his own public persona, brick by painful brick. The Sunrise Initiative was meant to be my legacy, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But a legacy built on a lie is just a monument to shame. It is a house built on sand. He looked out over the stunned crowd, his eyes searching for Femi's. Therefore, effective immediately, Adebayo Holdings is pulling all funding from this project. The chaos was immediate. The minister stormed off the stage. The crowd erupted. But, Kaelo shouted into the microphone, his voice ringing with a newfound authority, that money is not going back into our accounts. I am placing 50% of my personal fortune into a new foundation, a community trust, and its board of directors will not be bankers or politicians. It will be legally controlled by the residents of Makoko Waterside. It is their home. They will decide their own future. He had done it. He had demolished his own life. He looked over at Imani. She was staring at him, her beautiful face completely blank, as if she were looking at a stranger. Without a word, she turned and walked off the stage, disappearing into the chaos. He knew with absolute certainty that he would never see her again. He was alone, stripped of his wife, his reputation, and his empire. It was terrifying, and for the first time in his life, he felt free. He stepped down from the stage, ignoring the swarm of reporters. He walked towards the police line, towards the place he had last seen Femi. The crowd parted for him, their anger replaced by a stunned silence. He found her standing by a tree, watching him. Her face was unreadable. He stopped a few feet away from her, the space between them charged with 16 years of silence. He didn't offer money. He didn't make promises. He just stood there, a broken man taking his first real breath. "Can I see her?" he asked, his voice quiet, stripped of all artifice. "Can I visit your mother?" Femi looked at him. She glanced back at the community elders who were already beginning to argue amongst themselves, a new kind of power creating a new kind of problem. Her fight for her home was over. Her fight for its future was just beginning. She turned back to Kaelo. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. It was a tiny, uncertain opening in a door that had been slammed shut for a lifetime. And for Kaelo, it was a start.